having to continually cleanse data can be very frustrating. But luckily for us, Excel sheets provide a very valuable tool to validate data so that we don't have to constantly cleanse it. Now, this tool is called data validation. This is what we're going to cover in today's mini tutorial. Now, the very first thing that you want to do is open up your Excel sheets like I've got right over here. The next thing is have some sample data that you can use. For me, I have this very small table here. I'm going to be using this for testing. Next thing, select the range. For me, I'm going to select these three cells over here, and then go to the data button above. Now, over here, you'll see there's a button called data validation. Now, luckily for us, data validation, as soon as you hover over the button, it actually shows you here a little description of what this does, right? So this helps us, if we forget what this button does, gives us a little tooltip. But don't worry, if you're ever stuck, you can always hover over this button here called Tell Us More. Now this will take you to the Excel documentation. So if you're ever stuck, you can always come select this, and it will give you more information regarding what data validation does. Let's select data validation. Now, when you select data validation, you get a menu like I have over here. Now for me, I want to validate my range to only allow the names that I want. So I only want to allow these three names over here. Next, under allow, select the drop down and select list. Here we have a source and we have two options. For our source, we can either enter in some names manually. So for example, I'll enter in Dylan and Gwen, and we could continue entering in some names. But what I'm going to do for this is let's remove the manual names, and I'm going to select a range. What this will do is essentially allow us to change our list dynamically. I could have this range on a separate tab and only reference it when I need it. In the input message tab, what we can do here is we can say if I hover over the cell, I want to know what the cell does. I want to know more about my validation criteria, and I want to know what items I have. Now, for an input message, it will display this input message when I hover over the cell. Let's test this. So in my title, I'll say names. And for my input message, I'll say select a name from the criteria. For my error alert, in this tab over here, what this does is if you enter in data that shouldn't be there, say you enter in Marie instead of Dylan, Gwen, or Gabriel, as is my range here, the error message will say, that isn't allowed. So we can have a custom error message that displays. Now, if I leave this blank, it will still show an error message, but its own error message, but we can customize it here. So I want to customize this. So I'll say for my title, error, invalid list input. Let's select OK. Now notice, because I'm still selecting this range, I get my input message. This here is the input message that we put into our data validation. So it says names, as is the title that I gave, and it says select a name from the criteria. So we can always go and change the data validation and change our input message if we want to. So I'm going to change my title to name list. Now we can select the drop down and choose from the list. Additionally, if I enter in data that shouldn't be there, so I'll type in some gibberish, notice my error. invalid list input. I'm going to click cancel. A fascinating feature is if I change one of my names to Marie. Notice when I select my drop down, it changes. Now I have Marie as an input.